Hey, welcome to the Trinity Podcast. My name is Joel. I am joined today by Daniel Riddick, Tommy Carr, and Tom Messer. And it's sad to say this is actually our season 2 finale of the Trinity Podcast. It's been a great season.
It's been a great
really
season.
has been good.
There's been highs and lows and everything in between. No, there's been no lows.
What were the low points?
I don't know. Me giving Tommy a hard time for all these weird
Funny
words that
yeah.
he uses, or us making old references. Maybe those are the
To
low
me
points.
and Tom. I've done that all season.
But we thank you for joining us for this season of the podcast. It really has been a lot of fun, and we're going to kick off season 3 actually coming up in September. So we'll take July and August off. But we got one more podcast for you, and I think this one could be our best. I know I'm setting it up.
Wow.
This is an Ask Me Anything type of podcast.
Okay.
So I have questions here written down in front of me. I may use them, I may not. I may throw another question out.
Do it.
And feel free just to jump in and give your thoughts on whatever question I ask. And this could be a lot of fun.
Awesome.
Cool?
Love it.
All right, we'll start with an easy one for all of you. And this one's very simple, but it's kind of cool to know this about you. What is your favorite breakfast cereal and why? Really feel like you want to really get into the details
All right.
of this.
Let's go in reverse age order. Go ahead,
Yes.
Riddick.
Okay.
Go ahead.
So mine will be
Favorite.
easy on this, and then I don't know what this means about me, but I do not have a favorite cereal, and I don't eat cereal. There you go.
Wow.
So
Ever.
you do
Ever.
not eat cereal.
As
I
if
mean,
you've
I'm not
never-
saying if
you've
I
never
know
done
I
that?
have had a bowl of
Okay.
cereal.
Right.
I'm saying
It's
though,
just not your
like
thing.
I haven't had a bowl of cereal probably in the last 10 years.
Holy cow.
Okay, so then give us your go-to breakfast then. How
Oh,
about that?
I mean,
Coffee.
breakfast?
Yeah.
Oh.
Is it just coffee?
No,
Mr. Nathan?
no, I'd probably go with. I mean, I don't eat breakfast. That's the other thing. So,
Yeah.
yeah, I guess coffee.
That's it.
Which,
I don't eat breakfast.
by
I know
the-
this. I know everybody's listening right now is about to
Yeah,
have a lot of thoughts about how terrible that is. I don't eat breakfast,
You'll get some letters.
and if I eat
emails.
breakfast, I don't eat cereal.
It's the most important meal of the day. That's the letters that are about to hit
Yeah,
your
yeah.
inbox.
Which I will say, I've seen Daniel get his coffee in the church office, and it is literally pours a cup of coffee
Yeah.
and drinks it.
Black coffee.
It would save
Nothing.
him.
Nothing in his coffee.
And it would save him time if we could run an IV straight to his
Yeah,
office.
that's it.
Just let it fill him up.
Just straight diesel fuel. I don't know how he does that. Cereal, favorite?
Wait, reverse age order.
Oh,
Damn it.
sorry.
Wait a second.
I did not do that on purpose.
Yes, you did. I know what you got going there. So this
Okay,
is
we'll go
weird.
to
If
Tommy.
you didn't think I was weird, you're really going to think I'm weird now. And the first part's not weird. Like I've eaten Raisin Bran since I was a kid. Every morning, bowl of Raisin Bran.
Okay.
But I eat it awkwardly and weird. So fill up the bowl with the cereal,
Okay.
put the milk in, and then I wait.
Yeah, no,
Until it
I'm
gets
with you.
soggy.
Oh,
yeah.
my goodness.
And then I strain all of the milk out and then only eat the cereal.
Just the kind of mush
You still
cereal.
do that every
Still
day.
do it every day.
Yeah.
Isn't that, I know it. Yeah, I'm just being honest.
So you use the milk to make it soggy, then you pour the milk out.
I don't pour the milk out.
Oh, you strain it.
I drink the milk out.
Okay, gotcha.
And then I
gotcha.
eat the soggy cereal then. Sorry.
Okay, so the milk's not going to waste. You're
No, I
just-
do.
Okay. Wow.
Top that testimony.
Okay. Raisin Bran? Really?
Yeah, I know. I can top that. So I'm eating really healthy right at the moment. So
boy.
I eat oatmeal 5 out of 7 days.
There you go.
So
We could launch a whole separate debate, which is oatmeal cereal, but let's not get into
Yeah,
it.
Depending on where
that's
you were
true.
let me
born.
tell you the best way to eat cereal. This would be in my non-eating smart, healthy way. You take about a scoop of vanilla ice cream, you put it in a bowl. You put whatever cereal you want on top of the ice cream. You pour the milk on there. You put it back in the freezer for 10 or 15 minutes and then eat it. It's good.
I think you just described basically a milkshake.
In very
I mean,
complicated
really,
terms.
it's just the
I cannot afford to eat like
That's
that
a
now.
milkshake.
That would not be a healthy way to eat it.
So oatmeal
So-
5 out of the
No,
7 days?
yeah, no. If I ate cereal, I'm not where he is, but it'd be traditional, Wheaties or cornflakes.
Okay.
If you asked me to go make a bowl of cereal right now and I could just pick, because
Yep.
I'm not anti-cereal. I don't want to get
You're fine, Daniel. You don't have to.
I would
You're
I would
fine,
do a
man.
bowl of Life cereal.
What?
Life?
You know, Life. That's like
Mikey
isn't
likes
that a
it.
classic?
Yeah.
Do
Isn't
they
that,
still make that?
I don't know. I don't eat cereal.
the
I'm
old
saying
Mikey?
last,
I'll tell you what,
last
Mikey-
cereal I
I'll
can
tell you
remember. I ate
Mikey
Life
likes it.
cereal.
Mikey likes it.
When my
go.
grandkids come over, my wife buys
I'm
them
Googling if
their
Life is-
own box. Even if they want the same cereal, they get their own box of cereal.
Oh, yeah.
And Fruity Pebbles.
There you
Oh,
go.
so I can go with some Fruity Pebbles.
or
yes.
grape nuts. I do like grape nuts.
Fruity Pebbles is good. I would also go with
Cocoa Crisps. That's my kids
okay,
like
there's
that.
another good one.
The chocolate, version of that thing.
Oh man, it sounds like
But I would
do
never
not make
eat
Life.
either of those. Would not appeal to me.
Neither of those.
There you go.
I'm a Cinnamon Toast Crunch.
There you go.
There's something about Cinnamon Toast Crunch, but I don't eat a lot of cereal.
yeah.
Mine is usually pre-cooked bacon. That's like my
It's complicated.
breakfast. It's already cooked. You just warm it up.
Yeah.
But they don't make
It
Life
looks like
anymore.
they've changed it and stuff. I'm not sure. I think the Life that I was eating when I was a kid.
How do you
Daniel
call it a
says-
cereal?
I don't know. I pulled up
anymore?
Wikipedia and it's
complicated.
complicated. They start talking about as of 2018, they have varieties of cereal. They've changed it. I'm not sure.
So real quick, in your younger days, you were eating cereal.
Yeah.
I need to know this before cell phones and all that. Did you guys read the back of the cereal box? while
Without
you're-
question.
That was a thing. You
And
remember
played the
that?
games on the back of it.
and
They had
they had
mazes.
toys inside
Yeah.
the cereal box.
I can literally remember having the cereal box here, eating
Absolutely.
the cereal and like
Yeah.
playing whatever game.
No question.
I don't know if that's a thing anymore.
I don't think it is.
Neither is Life cereal.
Yeah, maybe not.
Okay, interesting. Very interesting. Okay, so here's another question. What are you currently reading? Which we know you're reading the Bible, but what are you currently reading and why? What are you getting from it? What's a current book that you are digging into right now? We'll go around the table.
Go ahead.
Okay. I'm reading Charles Spurgeon's Lectures to My Students. So it's not one
Classic.
topic, it's a
Classic.
bunch of lectures, obviously, that he gave to his seminary students.
Very good.
That makes me sound super not fun, I feel like.
No, that's really good.
No, that's great. That's great.
Reading. I'm usually reading multiple books. Not that I'm smart or anything. I just like different types of books. I'm reading Deeper by Dane Ortland, finishing that. Reading a biography on R.C. Sproul, which is a fascinating. Jeremiah Stanley gave me a copy of it. I'm reading through it. And I'm always reading a fiction mystery book at every time of my life. So I am reading The Big Four by Agatha Christie. So I've got an Agatha Christie book, a biography, and a Deeper by Ortland.
Okay. Pastor, how about you?
So I just finished reading several books that kind of corresponded with what we were just teaching on. Holy Sexuality in the Gospel by Christopher Wan. Them Before Us by Katie Faust. It's a book on really the nuclear family and importance of biological connection with your kids, that kind of thing. I'm getting ready to read, and I'm reading The Narnian about C.S. Lewis's imagination. And then I'm getting ready to read Colin Hansen's book about Keller's intellectual and spiritual formation. And then a book that I've really just started to work through. It's written by Howard Thurman. He was a fairly famous, influential African-American preacher, pastor. He wrote a book. It's called Deep River and the Negro Spiritual, how they speak of life and death, what the African-American slaves went through and how they responded to that from a spiritual perspective.
So I'm more of an audiobook guy. It's just kind of how I consume.
Do you consider that reading?
I like to.
No, I do. I mean,
Okay.
but
I always feel
But I don't
guilty
know why
about
people.
considering- I
I don't
feel
know why
guilty
you feel
about it.
guilty.
I just
consume it any way you can.
Yeah.
Well, My wife reads like physical books, and she knocks out books like
I
crazy.
have
She's
three
such a
ways.
reader.
I listen on Audible, I read on Kindle, and I have physical books.
Okay.
I hardly ever listen to a book on Audible that doesn't end up being good that I don't buy. What I like about Audible is it screens out. if I can listen to a book on Audible and I think, how many chapters did we just cover? Then it doesn't really have my attention. It's not worth me buying and reading.
Okay.
I struggle with, and this is probably like something weird about some competitive part of me. I struggle with audiobooks and Kindle, not because of the format, and I like to be able to see that I'm making progress. And like when I'm just looking at a flat digital screen, even though the page numbers are there, it's like I can't feel like I'm moving through something, which should have no bearing on what it is that I'm reading. But I don't know. I resist that just because I like to be able to see that I'm tracking through.
You know what cured me on that, and I probably have.
What cured me?
But no, I understand. No, I understand.
Sickness, though.
No, there is something about. There's nothing like having an actual book in your hand with a highlighter, or a book in your hand with something to take notes with. That is the quintessential way to read. What cured me of that, though, was I do so much reading when I travel. It's one of the best times for me to read. That after lugging so much luggage around, including in briefcases, backpacks, and that kind of thing, I again, if I'm reading a book and I'm going to travel, I will download it on Kindle because it is so much easier to bring this and read everything you want to read than not have that. So that's what cures me from that. It's not my first choice, but I will gladly choose that over not having to carry
take it with you.
books. Yeah,
Makes sense.
So there's an audiobook app that I've found called Libby, if anyone's interested. It actually connects with your library card here in Jacksonville, and you can download free audiobooks to listen to whatever the library has. And it can, you have to wait on some of them because they only have so many copies. But anyways, I do a lot of my audiobook reading through that app. I just finished a book called Do It Today by Mark Batterson, really good around habit formation. I just finished a fiction about the story about the International Space Station. It was incredible. This story.
Did y'all write that down? Did y'all get the name of that just in case?
The International Space Station, and then for some reason I've gotten into this time of history of World War II. So I'm actually listening to the Diaries of Anne Frank, and I'm going through that whole part of history. So all on audiobook, and according to Pastor, I shouldn't feel guilty because it's reading.
That's right.
Cool. So, all right, here is.
Can I make a confession before we move on?
Sure. Yeah, sure.
This is how opposite I am of audiobooks, and I'm not shaming it at all. I love the feel of a book in my hand. I love the type of pages. I love the artwork on the book, and I actually like the smell of a book.
Really?
I do. I'm just being as honest. Rhoda caught me at Chamlin's book mine. So I was about to buy his book, and I went, I flipped it and went, man, it just smells like reading. Yeah. I'm just, okay, there's my other weird confession for the day.
No, that actually brings up a good point, though. What does your reading habit look like? If somebody's like, man, I want to get into reading, but I'm having a hard time with it. Mm-hmm. Is it every day? Is it every other day? Is it very casual? Or do you time it out?
I mentioned this on the previous podcast we did. I have a time every day that I read the book that I'm reading. Now I don't like to be disciplined. I'm not like, gotta get through 3 chapters. I want to read, and when I feel like stopping, I stop.
You stop?
Yeah. But I do have a set time every day, and that's helped me be consistent with it. I would say digitally, that would be like books. I feel like I read a ton. I'm just a real kind of voracious consumer of articles and news and information. I will do that kind of throughout the day, and that's probably I really enjoy I enjoy Twitter, probably just for the reason of I view it as like may not be the best source but I view it as a kind of a way to curate broad content of information that I wouldn't seek out on my own.
Is yours the same time every day, or just depends?
No, it's not the same every day. It's rhythmic. Like this summer, a lot of my reading is going to be aimed at stuff that we want to be teaching, and we're going to focus on in the fall and spring of next year. So I will kind of gear up and read in waves, on that kind of thing. And then I usually have a book, like I have a book on my desk. It's it's kind of a business leadership book, and I have that there. And like if I find myself stuck doing something I don't like to do, like on a Zoom call I got to listen in on, or a meeting that I can consume that kind of content and it not be a distraction of what I'm supposed to be doing or having to do. I can multitask and do it. I do a lot of reading around things that I'm focused on, and then I do a lot of reading on if I get to a point in my life where like I feel empty from I've given out a lot of content and I got to replace kind of what I've given out. I will go into heavy stretches of reading, and then I read when I travel. And typically I have to do something usually about once a month somewhere. So I do a lot of reading around those kind of events.
Is that kind of yours is?
Yeah, very similar to that, I think. And I try to make sure I'm not denying people around me. I get enough energy from people. I love being around people. So I'm kind of gauge people around me. It's hard for me to read at work because there's people in my office 7 hours and 59 minutes of every day. And so that's difficult. I try to shut
I'm across the hall from you, so I testify.
It's nonstop. And I have a window in the door, so that's not a stop. That's just a, can I come in? And so it's harder to read there. So I'll try to make sure I pattern it around people. I don't want to deny people, opportunity, even my own family. But bedtime's a great time of reading for me if I can. And usually I do fiction at night. I'll do instructional reading during the day. And I'll do a lot of sermon reading in the morning before things starts moving.
Great. Awesome. Now, so this next one is a little heavier, but I think it would be really cool to hear your take on it. The end times.
They're going to happen.
It is going to happen.
Not that we're getting any kind of predictions or anything, but what's your take?
Predictions.
Give me your prediction.
Might as well.
But end times, what's your take? Just off the cuff, what do you feel?
What do I feel?
Okay, well,
Be more specific.
are we, let me word this in a better way. Are we in the end of the end times?
Okay.
Are we further into the end times? Where are we at? Is it something that is,
How about this?
okay.
Yeah.
Oh, Pastor word it.
We are closer to the end
Yeah, there we go.
than
We've ever been. That's right.
It's about to say midnight
Close.
cry.
Yeah.
There's a lot of, there is an enormous amount of interest. It's funny to me because I get asked a lot to preach on that, on end times content and subject. But it largely comes from the same group of people. In other words,
Yeah.
I don't know that everybody thinks about it, but the people who think about it think very deeply about it, and they want to really get into, the detail of it. It's not something that really on a personal level deeply fascinates me. It's just, I'm not drawn to try to figure it out. I think you can see it's pretty obvious. There's so much of what is happening in the current world that aligns with things that you would say that kind of feels like apocalyptic kind of thing. But Jesus tells us to be alert, to be sober, to look for the coming, but he doesn't tell us to obsess over it or try to figure out the details of it. We should be able to spot the signs. And if you have absolute confidence and trust in the plan and purpose of God, his coming is not negative. It's positive. It's hopeful. Right. It is the blessed hope. And so I don't think it's something we should be obsessing over. It's something that we should be eagerly anticipating. Yeah. And so I see it as a comforting thought, not as a ooh, man, we're living in these really dark, evil days, and we got to do something about it.
I think, the better, interesting lately. I've been doing some reading. In fact, there's a book I'm about to get on this that I think is when you think about it in its broadly historic context, like how has the church kind of historically, thought about these things, the coming of Christ, resurrection, those kinds of things. It keeps you out of the some of the kind of eccentric or kind of even obsession, kind of ideas of looking at everything and going, I bet that's the mark of the beast. I bet that's the Antichrist. I bet, and then I wouldn't go here for theology, but there are resources where you can kind of do some reading about some of what I would just call the real intense fascination with it, is a fairly modern expression of an understanding of this that has not kind of been a part of the church's kind of way of thinking historically. And so I just think the more that you kind of ground, what you think about the end of days and kind of real historic and orthodox belief, the safer you are from getting off on some kind of, scary tangents about people and places and technology. And again, I think all of that could or couldn't be a part of the picture. But it seems that the thing that the church, the New Testament church, was lasered in on was the reality of resurrection and the imminent return of Jesus. And it's like, those are like the two big rocks that the church has kind of historically held on to. A lot of the, kind of more sensational stuff, is fun, interesting. A lot of it's fairly modern in its kind of context. And, if you're into it,
Yes.
that's great.
It's was there a book that was
Left Behind.
I've seen all those.
Okay, here we go.
88 Reasons Why Jesus Returned in
Coming.
1988.
Yeah. That's
Tom and I
So-
lived through that. Y'all did.
Then the sequel was 89 Reasons.
Yeah, I'm kind of into it.
Okay, so what do you think about
I
the
do
blood?
like the
What do you think
end
about the
times.
blood moons? No, I'm just kidding. No, what do you?
Well, you can ask John Hagee, but he wrote a whole series of books on the blood moon.
So you're into it, okay?
I do. I enjoy that part of it, but I agree with Daniel and Tom also. Like, it's the eccentric part of it's weird. Like, I remember growing up and it's like, is Henry Kissinger the Antichrist?
Yeah.
This is really weird. But I think trying to understand the Bible and the way it's laid out, I think, trying to go through the book of Revelation and understand end times or look at what Jesus spoke in the Gospels, I think it's fascinating to me. And I enjoy that part of it. And part of it's because I just like to debate people. And and I just enjoy the discussion of kind of what's next on the timetable. Is there a rapture? Is there a millennium? I just enjoy the process of going through that. And so, I know Daniel, he saw some books on my shelf and he looked and he goes, it's done more to damage the church than Daniel, you can't say that. And so we may not totally agree on everything in end times, but we know, hey, here's our hope. There's a resurrection and Jesus is coming.
Yeah.
I think some people are going to be surprised. I think some people are going to be shocked, but at the end of the time, his plan's going to be perfect.
Yeah, that's a great way to look at it.
Yeah.
No, I've been in youth services where we've had rapture practice, so I'm just letting y'all know.
We had rapture.
Well, that's the kind of, those are the kinds of
remember.
things, and Pastor Tom just alluded toward it. I do think we start getting real off base when the idea of the return of Christ becomes a fearful thing.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And
exactly.
it has been, and I don't think we talked about it on the podcast, but I think you teed it up one time. There has been recent articles on rapture anxiety and all this kind of stuff. And it's like, just the fact that is a thing, and by the way, I know it's a thing because I lived through screenings of Thief in the Night and all that kind of stuff.
Oh, that's
it's
another
like it's like that's where you start getting to me kind of you start really quickly moving away from the understanding of the Bible.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's and just to clarify, I didn't orchestrate any rapture practice. Just letting y'all know. Because when I was a teenager at an event I was at, I still remember it.
practice.
And it probably stirred up a lot of anxiety in the room, I would have to believe.
But Joel was going to put a trumpet in the balcony one
Yes,
Sunday
yes,
as
I
he was
was
preaching.
not.
Yeah.
No, I was not. No, I love that's obviously a great way to look at it.
Yeah.
The promise of the resurrection and the return of Christ. So any more that you would like to give about the end times? Anything that you'd like to add to that question?
No, here's what I would tell people, I mean this sincerely. One of the great promises in the Bible is that people that read the prophecy of Revelation are going to be blessed. And I would just encourage people, if you're fascinated and interested in it, read it.
Yeah.
And
Be blessed.
don't obsess over it. Just read it and know that it all turns out good in the end.
Yeah.
You know?
That's great. Good. Something a little more lighthearted now. If you weren't a pastor, what would you do as a career? What would you do if you weren't a pastor?
You know, I'd
I'm
probably have a
interested.
business and probably study science and do environmental stuff and run a small business. And so that'd probably be what I'd do.
If you're watching or listening, that is what Tommy did for 40 years.
What am I, 100?
How long did you have your business?
97, 2007, be 20 years.
Oh, okay. Sorry, I was
Thanks,
way
Joe.
off.
Appreciate that.
Way off.
I'm a crypt keeper over here or something. Yeah, so 20 years I did that in the science field.
Very good. If you weren't a pastor, what would you do?
Retire.
But you've coached.
Yeah.
Yes.
I would. I don't know that I would say today it'd be one thing. The today version of me would find what my gifts and interests and passions are and do that. I don't think I think pastoring is a calling. So I discipline myself not to think about, if you're called to do something, you shouldn't be thinking about
The things I could be doing.
the other
Yeah,
things.
yeah.
Right.
So I don't spend a lot of time obsessing about it.
Yeah.
The thing that I enjoy about, and I think pastoring is a lot like coaching. You're trying to help people get better, be better versions of themselves individually, and be better versions of themselves as a team. I mean, that's what coaching is, and that is the pastor. That's what you're doing in pastoring. You just different, curriculum and outcomes and those kind of things. But it would. I think you can be fulfilled and satisfied using the unique skill sets, gifts, abilities, and passions that God gives you, and use those in whatever ways God puts in front of you.
Yeah, I feel the same way. I think interest is probably a good way. Like if you
Sure.
were just kind
What
of
would interest
dabbling
you?
in stuff outside of what God's called you to do. I enjoy real estate, and I like I've never done anything obviously vocationally. I've been in church ministry since my entire adult life.
Yeah.
But it's like I kind of enjoy real estate. In talking about it and looking at stuff. I'm one of those guys that like I kind of know. I'm on Zillow all the time, but not because I'm looking to buy anything, but because I like to understand what's going on in the real estate market all around. I don't know. I enjoy that. My grandfather was big. He was in ministry and then he retired and he got big into real estate. And I remember as a young kid talking with him about that. And some of it I think is purely like just like hot, like I've sold the homes that we've had over the course of as an adult life myself.
Right.
Not just because I thought I can do this and it's fun. That's probably
So here's what I'd say would be a fun way to look at this differently. So I've known him since I was 14. I've worked with him for 3 years. So they say, I don't think about it. Here's what I would say. If they didn't do this, maybe this is a better way. If they didn't do this, what do I think they would?
yeah.
Oh, okay.
Okay. So here's what I'd say. He'd be a serial entrepreneur.
Okay.
In other words, he'd have campers going. He'd have real estate going. He'd be
yeah.
boarding houses. He'd be having about 14 different things that all added up to a lot.
Yeah.
He would be inside of the corporate world at a pretty high level type CEO, because I think he's able to manage multiple businesses well. And I think he could translate that quickly into the corporate world to where people would benefit from
let
his
me do this. So I actually have, this doesn't play well, but I have on all of us what your career explorations
About to
would be.
psychoanalyze us.
Pastor just showed us a big graph if you're
And
listening.
here are the things that I would gravitate to. You ready? Here are the 4 things. Community and social services, which is really ministry.
Yeah.
And think that's like, for me, the rescue mission is such an outlet in thinking through that. Second would be legal. Third would be education, which is we have schools. And then the 4th would be business and finance. And
Yeah.
and literally
Checks out.
I do all those things. I mean, that is
You're
what I
getting to
do.
do what you want to do.
So
Yeah.
it's not much different. What I tell people that probably would be hard for me, and not saying at times I haven't thought that would be a fun thing to try. The thought of going somewhere and pastoring a smaller church that had no other, ministry associated with it. That's not a real big appeal to me. I mean, it's like
Because you're not wired like that.
yeah, I'm not like I'm missing out by doing that. Now there are times when I'm like that would be fun to try, just to see, but I think I think all of us we would gravitate to the things that we're hardwired, to do and find interesting.
Yeah. No, that's really good. Very interesting. I think you picked both of them pretty closely.
I think so. I mean, once you're
right?
around people long enough, you'd go, "Hey, that's."
kinda
Well,
pick it
here we're just in the middle. You want me to tell you what Tommy's would be?
Please do.
Oh man, this is getting good.
Please do.
And I have Daniel's too.
He's going to pull up like prophet of the end times.
Yeah.
So Tommy would hit the things that Tommy would gravitate to, and in his circle would be. This is the longer report.
Mine's probably pretty long.
Here it is.
So Tommy's would be community service, arts, design, sports, media, and entertainment, sales, and management.
There you go.
Man, there you go.
It's crazy,
Pretty
isn't it?
good. Yeah.
Yeah.
That is good.
And then Riddick's would be. I'm going to do you two in a minute, Joel. But,
oh, great. You got one on me.
I don't have Daniel's. I don't have his career exploration thing.
Just all around good guy.
All around. Just,
And I don't have Joel's.
Sorry about that.
well, I'll.
But no, I can tell you this: you would gravitate towards design and strategy things, sales and marketing. Where you don't gravitate to is administration and fiscal, operations and technology.
He's like,
there you go.
And Daniel's gravitations would be sales and marketing, design strategy.
Daniels,
Okay.
microphones and lights.
Oh, it is? Yeah, microphones and lights. That's very interesting.
Yeah.
Very good. Okay, 2 more questions. Here's the next one. How do I know when God is talking to me? And this come from anyone in our congregation, someone making a huge decision, someone having to make a call on something, they're at a crossroad, and they're just like, how do I get that? Like we like to say, I have peace about this decision.
well, Tommy believes you can't. You can't.
Here we go.
Tommy believes unless they're reading the Bible, then that's okay. I'm just kidding.
That's probably.
How do I know when God is
Tell me,
talking
like,
to
that's
me?
true.
How do I have peace in a situation?
Well, it's simple.
So you have to be reading the Bible.
I have to read the Bible.
Read the Bible. Yeah.
God speaks. I mean, and I think you have to be careful you don't become too formulistic
Yeah,
about it.
right.
Okay.
And it creates a lot of problems and frustration for people that don't, not everybody thinks in the same way. So, it's not like you have this little grid and it's A leads you to B, which B, then you choose, then it leads you to, whatever. But there are 4 primary ways. God's going to speak through his word, okay?
Amen.
And when he speaks through his word, it can be either very directly, in other words, God can use the word personally applied in your life, or it could be principled. In other words, God's going to guide you by the principles that are taught throughout his word that you may have been exposed to. So he's going to speak to you through the word. He's going to speak to you through the Holy Spirit. The Holy Spirit is a guide. He brings to mind things that you know. He's going to use situations and circumstances in your life. So he speaks through the word, through the Spirit. He's going to speak through wise counsel in your life, people, which, if you're married, this can be your spouse. If you're a child, it's going to be your parents. It's going to be a spiritual leader. It's going to be a pastor. It's going to be, a mentor. It's going to be somebody that's older, wiser, experienced. In a multitude of counselors, there's safety. God establishes his purposes by wise counsel. So you have people that speak in your life. The Spirit of God speaks to you. The Word speaks to you. Mm-hmm. And then you have to have a sensitivity by what I don't like the word circumstance. I think that's a little bit too subjective. Okay. I call it the open shut door. Mm-hmm. God opens doors that no man can shut, and God closes doors that no man can open. And so it's by those circumstances that are revealed in your life, open and shut doors. And, typically every major decision in my life, every important thing, it's going to run through that grid. And I find that multiples of those always align in the things that God wants me to do or not do.
Yeah.
Yeah, mine would be the same. That's an eloquent way of saying just principles. I think I said in a former podcast a while back, for me, it's principles, which is the Word of God, people, and it's prayer. And 2 of 3 of those things normally and then what Tom says, then as you're doing that, the doors begin the steps of a good man are ordered by the Lord. And then all of a sudden the doors begin to open and close. But principles, people, and prayer. And if you leave one out, you are leaving yourself open to a potentially bad decision. Okay.
I think I think what those guys said is the answer. I think on the other side of that, sometimes where we get into trouble is when we start to try to interpret the voice of God or whatever from things that get away from truth or scriptural or counsel or the leading of the Spirit. We start looking for kind of real abstract signs. I saw a bird. The bird was blue. Mm-hmm. And the car that I wanted to buy was blue. God showing me buy this blue car. It's like, okay, well, that's an exaggeration, but there's a reality that sometimes we're kind of passing by the things that, like Tommy and Tom just said, truth, counsel, and whatever, and we're looking for just kind of real shooting star kind of stuff, and it's like that's probably not the pattern of the way that God's going to direct us, usually.
Yeah. Good. All right. Final question.
I just want to know, Daniel laughed when Tom said the Spirit will tell you. What'd you laugh? What was the laugh?
I'm just joking. Okay. You know what I'm laughing at.
This could get you in trouble with your wives. It may not, but this is a final question. I think it's a good one. Every marriage relationship, obviously, there's no perfect marriage. Is there a way to fight fair with your spouse? And how do you do that? When you get into an argument, disagreement, how do you fight fair?
Well, you probably shouldn't be fighting with your spouse.
Yeah.
But if you do,
I think if you, I'll just say
terms,
this quickly. In fight, maybe fight, argue, deeply,
disagree,
seriously conversing about it. Yes. However you want to, however you want to say it. I think how you do it in a healthy way is you over, and this takes time. You learn each other, and I know whether I'm right or wrong, or I haven't. And most of the time, it's not right or wrong.
Right.
It's opinions or ideas. Mm-hmm. I know I can say something or communicate something in a way that's going to either, fuel the fire, and I don't mean that in a positive way, or not. And so I think to have those disagreements or intense conversations, it's to do it in a healthy way is to recognize, be aware of what is going to elicit or, unhealthy dialogue or responses from you or from them, and just avoid that.
Yeah.
And if you know that that always having the last word is going to be, it's like, well, don't let them say their thing and be okay with that. So yeah.
It's after being married for a while, you obviously get to learn. What button to push, what button not to push when it comes to arguments. The longer you're married, is it easier to work through disagreements and opinions?
Of course, yeah. I mean, I think just being around the same person, like Rhoda and I our first 7 years were not wonderful marriage years. We've told every couples class, I've told people at council, first 7 years we're really chipping off some of I'd say the selfish parts of us. Mm-hmm. I had way more than she did. And it's finally, hey, I want a peaceful marriage. I want to have a marriage that honors God. And then you find these principles like, hey, only by pride comes contention. And so there's somebody in here that's holding on to pride inside of this relationship. And then we realize this great principle. There are some things we were unable to solve by ourselves. And two professional fighters, they're paid money. They know the rules, but there's still a referee in the ring. And sometimes it helps to have somebody sit down that's maybe a little further down the journey than you. So is there a way to, when you say fight, I know what you mean.
I know what you mean, yeah.
To disagree? Absolutely. And still after 35 years, there are times that Rhoda will say something. And in fact, it happened last night. We were out on a bike ride. She said something to me. I'm like, we're different.
Yeah.
And she goes, yeah, but you're wrong. And I went, yeah, you're probably right. I'm probably wrong about it. But I think there are ways you start to understand, I don't need to win. And I don't need to fight every fight I'm invited to.
Yeah.
And I think you start getting the wisdom of how to work through it without small things becoming mountains
Yeah.
in your relationship.
Yeah. Pastor, how do you see it?
Here's the thing: most things that you argue about don't really matter in the long run. I think over the years I've learned that winning is not the goal in marriage, and I've kind of come to the conclusion not just about marriage relationship, but kind of all relationships. The more power you have in a relationship, the more beneficial it is for you to give up that power to use it to help other people. And so I found over the years that when whatever the pain point is, usually addressing what's causing the pain is better than winning the argument. And something's causing, and oftentimes it's me, it's what I did or didn't do. Or it may be something that in this case, Lisa would need help with that has caused a frustration. And if you take that approach, you don't have to. You can make it about the issue, not the argument. And when we were younger, we probably made it more about the argument, not the issue.
Yeah. Great.
And it actually starts becoming what he said is so really true. But like Rhoda and our arguments now look way different than they did when we were first married. There's a maturity to, when I say argument, the disagreements are way more mature. So Rhoda got into this habit because she loves household finance. When I tell you, she said she'll stare at the budget, she'll stare at the checkbook, she'll stare at the bank account, she'll argue over $5. Well, she got into this. I told the classic service one Sunday. She just got into this verbal thing, and it just started bothering me, Tom. It was like, she'd go, hey, I paid this. And then somebody would say something. She'd go, hey, I don't want my money going to, and then I don't want my money to not be used right. And I don't want, if we put my money, and I'm sitting there going, and that word my just got under my skin. So finally we were sitting there one day and we were at the mall, and she goes, well, if I'm going to pay that, I went, so I took her calculator and I kind of took my income as I own my business over the years and multiplied it times 20 years. And there's this big number on the screen. I went, this is how much money I've contributed to the marriage in the last 25 years. And she hadn't worked since Andrew was born, so I put a 0. And I went, this is how much money you've put in the bank in the last 25 years. She goes, put your number back up. So I put my number back up. She goes, hand me the phone. So she goes, puts a 0. She goes, that's how money we'd have left if you handled our finances. I went, yeah, you're probably about right. And so I think there's this thing. And then Tom had said something that really helped us, actually. He was talking about staying faithful in your marriage. And he had said in one of his messages, he goes, you know what I do every time before I go on a business trip? I take a really good look at Lisa. And then that is the thing I have fixed in my mind as I'm going, in a marriage. And if ever temptation comes or anything, I've always got this picture of fixed stuff. So sometimes I'll find our old yearbooks or something, and I'll see a picture of Rhoda, and I'm like, I remember when I fell in love with her. And I remember the times that we had together, and I remembered everything. I do that in couples counseling. Before we ever get into the arguments, I'll say, tell me why y'all fell in love.
Yeah.
And it's amazing when you start to remember, the fight takes on a whole different feeling once they go, she was beautiful and she was so, okay, we can get back there. And then it changes. One funny story about that time, I was going to go on a business trip, Eugene and I, and so I'm sitting there going, we're going to be on 3 days. And I'm like, I remember what Tom told us in that sermon. So here comes Rhoda, and she's going to be so mad at me. But she comes around the corner, and she's going to give me a kiss goodbye. And she comes out, and her hair is going 14 different directions. It's early in the morning. She's got on this old blue terry cloth robe. So I looked at her, and she comes up. She goes, what? I said, do you remember what Tom told us? It's probably in the right mental image for me to keep. And she just went, I'm going in the house. So, but yeah, you remember why you fell in love with them.
Yep.
You rehearse that in your mind. You get a picture of that. It'll change your fight.
You know,
Yeah.
this is not really, this is good counseling in an office with somebody. It's probably not great podcast conversation, but you know, and again, I do think it happens as you get older. You figure things out in a different way. If your ultimate goal, which it should be, is to get your spouse to the throne of God as the best possible version of them that they can be, and that's what your responsibility is,
Yeah.
then you stop. You're not going to get to the throne of God and God's going to pull out a scoreboard and say, hey, you had, 480 arguments.
And you won.
You won, 360 of them.
Yeah.
That's not what's going to happen. It's you're gonna stand before God and you're going to give account of how did you make her, how did you help her, how did she help you become the better version of yourself, the more Christ-like version. And doing that is where that's the great joy in marriage, is that you actually begin to see the work of sanctification in your life and the work of sanctification in your spouse's life as a result of how you are choosing to live and handle things. And again, that sounds really, super spiritual and maybe in some ways a little bit impractical. But if you do that, then it doesn't really matter who makes the money.
Yeah.
It matters that it really matters more that you can appreciate what each brings to the relationship. And I think about it all the time. There's things I'm really good at and there's things I'm not good at. And, and there's things that Lisa would not do well if it wasn't for me. And I don't hold that over her head.
No.
I just know that's part of the reason why we're brought together. And there's oftentimes my kids will say to me, can you help me with this? I say, your mother's probably better equipped to do that. Because if I help you, I'm going to be like a sledgehammer on
Here comes the law.
But I've learned that. And
you appreciate that part of her.
Yeah, and then there are times when I'm like, well, you better not talk to your mother about that because,
And when they become sort of part of the sharpening of you, when you see them as sharpeners, not as naggers or, whatever the word would be. So we were down, I was so excited, Tom. Daniel, we rented, shared in the congregation here one day. I was so excited. We're going to get a car and go down to St. Augustine and spend some time. Got a convertible. So I called one of the guys in the church and he goes, I've got a Maserati that's just going to be, it's going to be great. So day before it broke down, but he says, I got a brand new Corvette. Man, you put the top down. So we're driving around and I am thinking Joel, I am like living my best life now. It's just, so I'm sitting there and Rhoda's next to me. We got 80s music playing. And I'm like, this is a great day. Well, this guy comes up to us in a work truck and he looks down in there and he goes, man, what a car. He goes, y'all are living what the life y'all are living. And I'm like, thank you, man. Appreciate that. Yeah. Rhoda, it's a rental. I just went, what are you doing? And so he goes, oh, and I said, Rhoda, what are you doing? Why? She goes, well, the Bible says, I don't want him to think more highly of you than he ought to. I'm like, that's a little misuse of that. But she goes, but it was the way, and I kind of checked my spirit. We started laughing the whole time about it. I'm like, you're right. And so once you start to see them as that benefit, it is a wonderful thing.
Well, let's end it this way. We love our listeners. We're thankful for them. Real quick, different interactions you have had with people that listen to the podcast over this second season. Have you had some people walk up to you, whether it's in public, at church? Have those been cool conversations?
Yes, actually, I get texts from people, I say weekly, that watch it and say, hey, listen, here's what I thought, here's what I did. Had another person said, one of the guys said something, could you explain something for him? And so I was trying to explain something somebody else on the podcast had said, which was really, really fascinating thing. We've had people visit our church, which has been really neat. And here's the way they say it. You can tell what age they are about my age. They're like, we've been watching y'all on TV. And, we used to see y'all in person. It was amazing. I actually had somebody stop out in the lobby and say, hey, can we get a quick picture with y'all? I'm like, Okay, but it was great. I mean,
Yeah.
they've enjoyed, everybody I've talked to has really enjoyed the process, and they think you're the best host.
Oh my goodness. That's where, actually, a shout out to the Mandarin campus. I was out there last week and talked to a very nice couple out there. And one of the first things they said to me is, we listen to the podcast every week. So really, really cool. You guys have the same
Yeah,
experiences?
great. Same, just what Tommy
conversations?
said. Every week people appreciate it, and it's always good to be able to engage around in ways that we're almost never going to do on
Right.
a Sunday morning.
Yeah.
A sermon delivery and the environment
Yeah.
is such a different dynamic, and so this has been a really, I think, incredible outlet for us to be able to.
Do we get requests for topics to talk about?
We do at times. I do. People will message me and give me different topics. In fact, the one we did a couple of weeks ago actually it was last week, on parenting adult children, was from my father-in-law. He listens regularly.
Yeah.
He just said, "Hey, you guys ever thought about doing one about parenting adult children?"
That's
I'm like, "Hey, let's give it a
Tee it
shot
up right now.
There you go.
Tell them about the feedback you got when you put out the short ad of you watching yourself on the podcast.
I got plenty of hate mail on that one. No, all of my friends gave me a really hard time on that
That
one.
was
They were
funny.
like, "You're literally watching a video of yourself and you're going to promote the podcast." They made me do it, everybody. They made me do it. No, podcast has been a lot of fun this second season. We appreciate all of you watching and listening in. It's been a great time. I've learned a lot being a part of these podcasts, and we just got more in store for season 3, but we're going to take a couple of months off. Feel free to go back and listen to the other podcasts, maybe some that you've missed, and we'll pick it back up in September. So as always, right here at Trinity, we want to help everyday people discover an extraordinary life with God. Thank you so much for being a part of that. We will catch you on season 3. We'll see y'all later.